The summer of 1904 in Missouri was thick with heat, the kind of air that clings to the lungs and bends time into a haze. On the outskirts of Buckner Ridge, a farmhouse sat with its shutters drawn tight, as though it wished to close its eyes against the world. That house belonged to a widow, Eleanor Ashcroft, and inside, a door had been sealed. Not locked, not barred in haste, but sealed. A room shut against breath, against light, against intrusion. They called it the quiet room, and what the sheriff found there was never meant for mortal eyes. He 3-second pause, comment the phrase, "Seal the silence." Twice below if you can hear me, because once you know what I'm about to tell you, you cannot return to ignorance. It began with whispers among neighbors, the kind that circle like carrion birds before truth finally lands. No one had seen the Ashcroft children for weeks. A smell drifted from the orchard, something sweet, putrid, impossible to ignore. Yet the woman who opened the door to visitors wore no fear on her face, only a calm that did not belong to grief nor to life. Her dress was black, buttoned high despite the punishing sun. Her words were measured, deliberate, like a woman who had rehearsed them in her solitude. "They're sleeping. Please don't wake them." The law came, not with confidence, but with dread. Sheriff Carver himself would later admit that he felt the air pressing on his chest before he ever crossed the threshold. It was cooler inside, yes, but unnaturally so. The windows sealed, the curtains drawn. The house had become a womb for silence, a theater of absence. Plates set for meals never eaten, a music box that no neighbor had ever seen before, playing faintly from nowhere. And on the stairs, a trail of dust undisturbed for weeks, as though footsteps had been erased by hands unseen. Viewers, listen closely now. What Eleanor Ashcroft did inside that house was not an accident of madness. It was not grief alone. It was part of a pattern older than Missouri itself, one of rooms sealed against the world, of children swallowed by silence, of women who turn themselves into priests of sleep and sorrow. This story has been buried in archives, whispered only in fragments, but tonight I place the key in your hands. Subscribe now, and in the comments, tell me where you are watching from, because stories like this should never be heard alone. To understand what was discovered inside that sealed room, you must first understand Eleanor Ashcroft herself, not as a grieving widow, but as a woman who seemed to rewrite her own nature. Before 1901, neighbors recalled her as impeccable. She baked for the church, tutored children, and wrote verses under a pen name in the local paper. They admired her poise, her restraint, her refusal to complain. But perfection is not peace, it is a mask stretched tight and masks crack. When her husband, Edward, died suddenly of typhoid, Eleanor inherited the farmhouse and 4 children under the age of 10. What most people overlooked was this: she planned the burial alone, accepted condolences with a frozen face, and within days she locked herself into routine, so exacting it seemed less like survival and more like ritual. One poem she wrote after Edward's death was published only once and then forgotten. Children kept in quiet rooms learned not to disobey. At the time, no one understood it for what it was, a confession. The decline was subtle, then swift. The children vanished first from church, then from the school register. When neighbors inquired, Eleanor replied with a phrase that unsettled them: "They need more rest than the world allows." Curtains closed, mirrors removed, neighbors turned away at the door. Yet the dishes on the porch were always returned spotless, the property taxes always paid. By the standards of the time, she was not a woman unraveling, she was simply private. But privacy can be weaponized. In late 1902, one of the children, Ruth, appeared barefoot at a neighbor's farm, dazed, wearing a nightgown in the afternoon sun. When asked why she wasn't in school, she whispered, "We have to be quiet when she's sleeping. If we wake her, she cries." The neighbor, unsettled, returned her. The next day, the windows were covered. From then on, the Ashcroft children were rarely glimpsed again. Do you feel it, that edge of dread? That house was not merely a home. It had begun to transform. The garden withered. Laundry disappeared from the line. And the neighbors who swore they heard a music box at night could not explain how the sound carried when Eleanor had never owned one. The first real sign of horror came with the boards. Windows nailed shut from the inside, sealed, not to keep intruders out, but to keep something in. By 1903, Eleanor Ashcroft had become less a member of the community. and more a figure glimpsed like a shadow at the edge of fields. She no longer sat in church pews. Her children's names slipped from conversation. The farmhouse itself seemed to retreat. Boarded windows, overgrown garden, a chimney that once breathed smoke each dawn now stone cold. Neighbors who lingered too long outside swore they heard scraping inside, like a chair dragged slowly across wooden floors, though the curtains never stirred. And yet, Eleanor maintained her surface order. Supplies arrived through mail catalogs, quinine, sewing needles, candle molds, blank journals. She paid with precision, never late, never careless. But conspicuously absent were slates, chalk, school readers. She had once been praised for teaching her children their letters before age 5. She seemed intent on erasing words themselves. One man, a traveling salesman from St. Louis, knocked at her door in autumn of 1903. He recalled only years later hearing what he thought was a hymn from inside. A single phrase repeated, low, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. When she opened the door, she did not greet him nor smile. He asked directions. She answered only south. The road bends to it. Then, she shut the door, leaving him certain he'd seen a child in the shadows near the stairwell. Motionless, eyes wide, as still as a portrait. That was when people began whispering that the Ashcroft children were being kept, not raised. The house, they said, had become a cage of silence. Yet no one intervened. No law existed to measure the dangers of isolation. No authority cared to act on instinct. And so Eleanor's private kingdom grew stronger. The truth emerged in fragments. Stories too strange for the time to be taken seriously. A farmhand claimed he saw blankets nailed across doors inside the house. Another neighbor swore he saw Eleanor, at dawn in her nightdress, standing in a field, holding something small to her chest, rocking on her heels as though listening to music no one else could hear. And children in town began whispering about a music box that played at night, though no music box was ever seen. But the true descent began in May of 1904. When the Ashcroft homestead went completely silent, mail uncollected, smoke absent, windows boarded, and for the first time even the dog's barking stopped. The house was no longer hiding its secret, it was suffocating in it. On June 11, 1904, the silence broke not with a scream, but with a stench. A farmer's boy, tending fence along Buckner Ridge, followed a foul sweetness through the trees until he reached the Ashcroft homestead. What he saw rooted him in place. The family dog, Rufus, shallow buried in the garden with a child's shoe lying half sunk in mud beside the porch. He ran home shaking, his father storming into town the next morning to tell the sheriff. 3-second pause, comment the phrase, "I do not look away." Twice below, "If you've crossed the threshold with me," because this is the moment where silence turns to horror. Sheriff Andrew Carver had been in office less than a year. He was not hardened, not prepared for this. He admitted later that he felt an unease the moment he saddled his horse that morning. With Deputy Nolan Price beside him, he rode the 11 miles under a punishing sun. They arrived at noon. The house stood on its hill, shutters drawn, boards nailed across second-story windows. No smoke, no sound, not even a bird perched on the fence line. Carver dismounted and knocked. Silence. He called her name. Silence. Then, without touch, the door creaked open, as if the house itself had been waiting. Eleanor Ashcroft appeared in the threshold. Black dress buttoned to the throat despite the heat, auburn hair pinned into a severe coil. Her face pale, unreadable. "Mrs. Ashcroft," Carver said carefully, "the neighbors are worried. They haven't seen the children." Her eyes shifted past him, fixed on some distance he could not follow. Then, as if recalling lines from a script, she nodded. "They're sleeping." Sheriff Carver would later tell a reporter that no sound in his career ever haunted him like those stairs. Each creak was not just wood beneath his boots. It was as if the house itself was warning him back. Behind him, Deputy Price muttered a prayer under his breath, though he wasn't a praying man. Eleanor did not follow. She simply stood in the parlor below, hands folded, gazing upward with a faint smile, as if she knew exactly what they were about to see. The second floor was darker still, every window covered, nailed from the inside with planks and blankets. The air grew thicker with each step, tinged with ammonia, stale milk, and something far more human. Carver's lantern flame flickered, shrinking against a draft that seemed to breathe against them. The first door they tried was locked. The second opened only to reveal a room stripped bare, no bed, no chairs, just claw marks in the plaster near the floor. Deputy Price whispered, like something was trying to get out. Carver hushed him, pressing forward. At the end of the hall stood the last door, heavy, reinforced, a strip of cloth nailed across the threshold to keep the air from escaping. From behind it came the faintest sound, something that might have been a whimper or might have been the echo of their own breathing. Carver's hand trembled as he pressed the latch. It resisted, swollen with moisture, but gave with a shudder. The smell struck, first sweet, rotting, medicinal. His lantern light pushed into the chamber, and for a moment, the two men could not comprehend what they were seeing. The room was small, too small. The windows were not just boarded, but bricked over from the inside. A single chair sat in the corner, facing the wall, its legs chained to the floor. Around it lay dozens of small objects scattered like offerings, dolls with their faces scratched away, candle stubs burned to black nubs, bits of ribbon tied into careful knots, and against the far wall, 4 narrow beds. Not beds really. Wooden crates lined with fabric, lids open, 3 empty, 1 still occupied. Carver lowered the lantern. Inside, wrapped in a blanket, was the still form of a child no older than 6, eyes closed, skin gray, lips faintly blue. Deputy Price stumbled back, retching. Carver whispered, though the words hardly left his throat, "Dear God, how long have they been in here?" And then, silence, except it wasn't empty, because in the shadows, something shifted. At first, Carver thought the movement was his lantern flame flickering off the damp stone wall, but then it came again. Subtle, deliberate, a shuffle of fabric, a breath, ragged, shallow. Deputy Price raised his revolver, his hand unsteady. The sound came from the corner, near the chair bolted to the floor. Carver angled the lantern toward it. The light crawled across the wall, across the broken dolls, across the candle wax hardened like frozen tears. Then it found something pale, not an object, a hand, thin, bird-like, fingers curled, trembling as though even lifting them had taken every ounce of strength. Carver stepped closer, the lantern casting his shadow long and crooked across the wall. What it revealed made his chest seize. A child alive, though scarcely, hollow cheeks, eyes wide unblinking, reflecting the lantern like glass. The child did not cry, nor speak, nor move beyond that faint twitching hand. It was as if sound itself had been drained from them. Deputy Price whispered, "Good Lord, how long's he been in here?" But the boy did not answer. He only raised one finger, slow, mechanical, and pointed toward the bed where the gray, skinned child lay still. Carver felt the weight of the air close in, thicker now, almost impossible to breathe. He turned back toward the stairwell, ready to call Eleanor up, to demand answers. But she was already there. She stood at the top of the stairs, hands folded as before, her face perfectly calm. The lantern light struck her eyes, and for the first time, Carver realized they were not vacant. They were alight. "Do you see now?" she said softly. "They're quiet at last." That's what they wanted, to be free of the noise. A Price barked, "What in God's name have you done?" But Eleanor only tilted her head, her voice low, rhythmic, nearly melodic. Like the lullaby the salesman swore he once heard, "The world is cruel. I only silenced it for them. Now they rest." The boy in the corner trembled, his glassy eyes fixed on her, not in recognition but in terror. And then, from the bricked wall itself, there came a knock. The sound was faint at first, a hollow talk, talk, talk from behind the bricked wall. Carver froze, every nerve screaming that it could not be what it seemed. The wall was solid, mortared, sealed. Nothing could move behind it, nothing alive. Deputy Price swore under his breath, cocking his revolver toward the bricks. His voice shook. "Sheriff, tell me you heard that." Carver nodded, unable to speak. The knock came again, louder this time. 3 raps, then silence. The boy in the corner jolted, his frail body spasming as though the sound had entered him. His lips parted, but no words came, only a wheeze, high and thin, like wind through a crack. Eleanor did not flinch. She only stepped closer, her black dress brushing the boards, her smile fixed. "They're not gone," she whispered, "not really. They linger because they cannot bear the noise of the world. Here, I've given them peace." A Carver's instincts told him to drag her down those stairs, to shatter the bricks, to pull whatever was hidden into the light, but another part of him, something deeper, older, urged him not to, that if he disturbed what was sealed in that wall, he might set it free. Deputy Price, trembling, hissed, "Sheriff, say the word, I'll break it." But Carver did not answer. His eyes stayed locked on Eleanor. "What did you put in there?" he demanded. Her reply was calm, chillingly assured. "Not what? Who?" The knock came a third time, louder, rhythmic now, as if whatever was on the other side had learned they were listening. The boy in the corner whimpered. Deputy Price raised his gun higher, and Eleanor Ashcroft, her smile widening, whispered like a benediction, "They're awake." The chamber seemed to shrink with every passing second. The lantern flame guttered as though the air itself recoiled from what pressed against the wall. Carver's voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. "Eleanor, how many?" Her gaze never left the bricks. Her lips moved faintly, as if reciting numbers to herself. 1, 2, 3, 4. She did not speak them aloud, but Carver could see the count in the motion of her mouth. It went higher, past 10, past 20. Her lips kept moving. Deputy Price shouted, "God Almighty!" "Sheriff, she's buried them in there!" His finger tightened on the trigger, ready to fire into the wall itself. But before he could, the knocking changed. No longer 3 measured taps, it became frantic. Dozens of impacts at once, overlapping. Fists, hands, fingernails clawing, scraping, dragging against the mortar. The sound filled the room like a storm against stone. The boy in the corner clamped his hands over his ears, rocking violently. The still child in the crate seemed almost to stir, as though the noise reached even the dead. Eleanor's smile widened into something unnatural, stretched thin and trembling with delight. "Do you hear them?" she whispered. "Do you hear how loud the world was to them? I gave them silence, and now you've woken them." Carver forced himself forward, gripping her arm, yanking her toward the door. "What's in that wall, Eleanor? Answer me." Her eyes locked on his, burning with conviction. "Children who could not bear the noise of life. Children who begged me to quiet them." The wall shuddered. Not just the sound now. The very bricks quivered, mortar dust raining to the floor. Deputy Price fired a shot into the plaster. The report thundered through the chamber, deafening, final. For a moment, all was still. Then, something answered from behind the wall. Not a knock this time. A voice, thin, childlike, in unison. The word hung in the air, soft yet crushing. Carver's grip on Eleanor's arm tightened, but she didn't resist. She only leaned forward, as if listening to a lullaby only she could understand. Deputy Price staggered back, his revolver shaking. "That ain't real. That ain't." He choked on the words as the sound came again. This time from 2 voices. Then 4. Then 6. They overlapped, high and low, small throats weaving into a chorus that no living lungs could sustain. It filled the bricked wall, seeped into the floorboards, trembled through the lantern glass until the flame quivered near death. The boy in the corner writhed, covering his ears until his nails broke skin, leaving thin lines of blood. His eyes bulged, fixed not on Eleanor, but on the wall, as though he saw something the others could not. Carver pulled Eleanor closer, his voice breaking between rage and fear. You sealed them in alive." Her expression softened, almost tender. "They begged for it, to be free of the world screaming. I only gave them quiet. But you..." Her eyes snapped up to his, dark and blazing. "You've disturbed their rest." The voices swelled, multiplying until the room shook with their unholy chant. "Not just..." Now other words formed, twisted and unfinished. "Please," cries, the rattling syllables of children gasping for comfort that never came. Deputy Price snapped. He lunged to the wall, swinging his revolver like a hammer, slamming the butt into the mortar. "We're getting them out, Sheriff. I don't care what she says." The bricks groaned under the blow. A hairline crack split through the plaster, coughing dust into the lantern light, and from that fissure, cold air spilled, sharp and fall, as though the grave itself had exhaled. The voices stopped. Silence. Then the faint scrape of something moving just behind the wall. Slow, patient, as though it had been waiting for the crack. Carver's hand shot out, grabbing Price's shoulder before he could strike again. "Stop! You don't know what you're letting out." But Price was beyond reason. His eyes were wild, foam at the corner of his mouth, veins corded in his neck.
"They're children, Sheriff. You gonna just leave them in there? He swung again."
The crack widened. Dust rained down like ash. The lantern flame bent backward from the fall draft pouring through, a smell so sour and ancient it clawed the throat raw. The boy in the corner screamed without sound. His mouth open wide, body rigid, eyes rolled white. Eleanor's lips trembled into something halfway between laughter and weeping. "It's too late," she whispered. "They've heard him. They've heard the promise of rescue." Carver lunged, but Price had already raised his revolver for one final blow. He drove the steel butt hard into the wall. The bricks cracked, split, fell, and behind them, blackness. Not the empty black of stone, but a void that breathed. The lantern light refused to settle in it, as though swallowed whole. Yet within that suffocating dark, faces began to press forward, small, countless. Children's faces, gray and bloodless, their eyes wide and milk white, their lips moving in perfect, silent unison. Then, all at once, they spoke, not in cries, not in words of pain, but in a single command, a chorus that rolled through the marrow. "Stay." The lantern shattered. The chamber plunged into darkness. The lantern's last hiss faded, leaving only the ragged breathing of 3 living souls in the chamber. The dark was thick, alive. Carver could not see Price beside him, nor Eleanor, nor even his own hands. Yet he felt the space closing, the walls shrinking, the blackness pressing in like damp cloth against his face. Then came the whispers, not from one place, but from everywhere, all around, above, beneath, behind the broken wall, inside his own skull. A dozen voices at once, high and thin, weaving over each other like wind through reeds.
Stay with us."
"Don't leave." So loud out there, so loud. Deputy Price fumbled in the dark, his revolver clattering against stone, his voice cracked into madness. "Where are they? Sheriff, where are they? I can feel them." "God help me, I can feel their hands." Carver reached for him but grasped only air. The boy in the corner let out a sudden shriek, cut short as if a hand had clamped over his mouth, and then soft, fragile, barely more than a thread of sound, Eleanor's voice, right behind Carver's ear. "They like you, Sheriff. They want you to stay too." The whispers surged, swirling, filling the void with 1,000 overlapping pleas. Tiny breaths brushing his skin, tiny fingers grazing his coat, cold, hungry, endless. And in that moment, Carver understood opening the wall hadn't released them. It had fed them. Something brushed Carver's wrist, small, cold, too light to be human, too heavy to be air. He jerked back, heart pounding, but another touch came, on his sleeve, then his neck, then his cheek. Dozens of them now. Tiny hands, fingers curling, pulling. Their nails were soft like wax, yet they clung with unnatural strength. Deputy Price screamed somewhere in the dark.
"They've got me."
"Sheriff, they've..." His voice cut into gurgles, as though drowned under water that wasn't there. Carver lunged toward the sound, grasping nothing but empty black. The whispers grew clearer, sharper, forming words that stung like needles in his ears. "Lie down. Be still. Quiet now." Eleanor's laughter rippled through the dark. She sounded almost joyous. "See, they never wanted to hurt. They only wanted silence. And now, they'll give it to you too." Something cold pressed against Carver's lips. A child's hand, forcing his mouth shut. Another clamped his chest, pinning him as easily as if he weighed nothing. The air left his lungs in short, panicked bursts. Then, from the broken wall, a face emerged. Not fully, only the suggestion of one. Pale skin like paper, eyes like holes torn through cloth. A child's head pushing halfway out of the stone, as though the wall itself was birthing them. It opened its mouth, and in a voice that was not a voice, but a vibration inside his skull, it spoke a single word. So calm, so final, it froze his blood. "Sleep." Carver's knees buckled. The command seeped into his bones, not a suggestion but an irresistible law. His revolver slipped from his hand, clattering uselessly into the black. The world dulled. The voices no longer pierced but hummed, gentle and lulling. The tiny hands that once clawed now cradled him, guiding him down as though laying a child to bed. Somewhere far away, Price still thrashed, his cries fading into muffled sobs, then into nothing at all. The boy in the corner was silent too. Eleanor's voice drifted through the dark like a lullaby. "Hush now, Sheriff. The loud world is gone. No more pain, no more duty, only quiet. Stay with them, stay with me. A carver's vision flickered, not with light. There was no light, but with images burning against the inside of his skull. Children huddled in a circle, their skin as gray as ash, their mouths moving in perfect silence. Eleanor among them, younger, radiant, her arms open wide, as though embracing her congregation of the lost. For one sliver of a heartbeat he felt it, the promise of release, the exhaustion of years lifting. The silence was beautiful. But then, beneath the lull of whispers, a faint sound, a heartbeat, his own stubborn, refusing to fade. Each thud was an anchor pulling him back from the black waters. The children's faces turned all at once toward him, their mouths opened wider, their fingers dug deeper into his flesh, as if realizing he might resist. The lullaby soared into a hiss. Eleanor's calm cracked into fury.
No, don't fight them. Don't you dare wake them.
Carver's breath shuddered back into his chest. Against the weight of 100 tiny hands, he forced his body upright, trembling, gasping like a man surfacing from deep water. Carver's lungs burned as he dragged in air, each breath jagged against the press of countless small hands. The whispers screeched, no longer soothing but sharp, furious. Like glass grinding against glass, through the black Eleanor's pale face appeared inches from his own, eyes glowing faint as embers. She wasn't smiling now. Her voice cracked with rage and devotion all at once. You don't understand, Sheriff. The world out there, it chews them. It spits them. War, sickness, hunger. Do you think those children had a chance? Her bony fingers clutched his collar, pulling him close until he could smell the grave, soil stench in her breath. I gave them peace.
I gave them quiet. Do you hear it? No crying, no starving, no screaming.
Only silence. And still you fight it. The hands tightened, Carver's ribs groaned. His heartbeat thundered like a drum in the void, and the children recoiled at the sound, as if the noise itself was poison. In that moment, clarity struck him. Silence wasn't their refuge, it was their prison. Eleanor hadn't soothed them. She had bound them, fed them lullabies until they forgot the sound of their own voices, until they became part of the house itself. And now, they wanted him too. Carver gritted his teeth, forcing out words through the crush of their grip. You didn't save them, Eleanor, you buried them alive. The void quaked with their wailing, a terrible chorus breaking through for the first time, not whispers now, but screams, and the hands once soft turned savage. The chamber erupted in chaos. The screams of the children, raw, jagged, inhuman, rattled the stone itself. The air thickened, alive with writhing shapes clawing at Carver's arms, his throat, his chest. Eleanor shrieked above the din, her voice slicing through like steel.
No! Hold him! He belongs here!
Carver's vision blurred, but his instincts clawed through the haze. His hand fumbled against the floor until it found cold iron. His revolver. Blind, desperate, he swung it up, not aiming at Eleanor, not at the faces in the wall, but at his own chest, his heartbeat. The one thing they couldn't stand. He slammed the butt of the revolver against his ribcage over and over, each strike echoing like a war drum in the chamber. Toot, toot. The children recoiled, their screams unraveling into screeches of pain. The whispers splintered. Hands fell away from him. Carver staggered to his feet, sucking in ragged breaths, and bellowed with every last shred of strength in his lungs. I-A-M-S-T-I-L-L-I-V. The sound crashed through the chamber like a cannon blast. The children wailed, the walls convulsed, and the house itself seemed to shudder under the weight of noise. Eleanor clawed at her ears, her face twisted in rage and agony. Stop. You'll wake them all. You'll ruin everything. But Carver didn't stop. He roared again and again, each cry tearing his throat raw, each heartbeat hammering louder, until the chamber split with cracks like thunder. The wall gave way. The floor heaved, and with a final scream, from Eleanor, from the children, from the house itself, the blackness collapsed in on itself. When Carver awoke, it was dawn. He lay in the ruins of the Calderon house, the boy gone, Price gone, Eleanor gone. Only shattered stone and splintered wood remained, as if the place had never been whole. But in the quiet morning air, he swore he heard it still. Faint, beneath the birdsong, whispers, "Stay, stay with us." And Carver knew he had not destroyed them. He had only awakened them.